Hi everyone, hope you're well. Hope you're having an amazing week thus far. It's so humid here in the DMV. It's kind of wild. Makes you want to move to somewhere that's a little less humid, but either way, so grateful that it's so nice and warm outside versus being in the winter because I'm a tropical-esque person. Welcome, a touch of Tule. Today we're going to be talking about music legends and their LGBTQ plus influences. Really excited about this conversation today. We'll be mainly highlighting artists like Kendrick Lamar and Beyonce Carter Knowles. Or sorry, Knowles Carter. I'm not part of the Beehive, y'all, but I do appreciate me some Beyonce, so excuse me if I mess up some of the facts about her. Welcome, Whitman-Walker. Just gonna get our pinned comment in here real quick, and then we'll get started. Okay. Want to get Whitman-Walker on. Hey, Rama. How are you?
Hi, Jewel. How are you?
I'm good. Love your hair. Looking
Thank you.
stylish as per usual.
Thank you. I love yours as well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Sound is quality.
Wonderful. Because I was doing a little funny thing.
You know, Instagram does the most sometimes. But yeah, let's get started. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, Whitman-Walker's Community Health Department has expanded its outreach efforts to include the social media platform. We cover various topics about HIV and STIs, sexual health practices, access to care, social determinants of health, and public health interventions. The community health team is here to educate and support you. My name is Jewel, and I use she, hers pronouns, and I work to bring educational Instagram lives to this space with Whitman-Walker's community health team, who's led by the amazing Rama, who's here with us today. Today, we're going to discuss music legends and their LGBTQ plus influences, but specifically highlighting Kendrick Lamar and Beyonce. I've personally been a Kendrick Lamar fan since first being introduced to that song, Blow My High, off of his Section 80 mixtape, and I really appreciate his lyricism and the message courageousness he practices in expressing himself and his art.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rama. Pronouns she, her, hers. And I'm so happy to be back here with Jewel. It's been so long.
Yes, it has.
And today we'll talk a little bit about, as Jewel mentioned, LGBTQ. Celebrities and the LGBTQIA influences, more specifically Beyonce and Kendrick Lamar. And I am a part of the Beehive. I heard Jules say such things like, I don't know the Beehive. Like, I'm not a part of the Beehive. Whoa.
I mean, not officially. I don't have the membership card, but I do appreciate everything Beyonce puts out because how can you not?
I am a founding member of the Beehive. I'm in recruitment, so please feel free to hit us up on the Whitman-Walker DM. That's what I do when I'm not doing the public health thing.
Also part of the Drake founding membership.
I'm all part of the Drake founding membership, but we're, as Jill mentioned as to why she loves Kendrick Lamar due to his art, and same as well for me. And I think Beyonce is an artist that occupies space of culture sensitivity, uses her art to convey a deep understanding of BIPOC folks and their experiences and to amplify our voices, which is extremely important. And overall, she's just legendary, similar to the legendary work that we all do every single day to share our stories and our experiences and really use storytelling as a way to uplift our communities and really encourage us to take care of ourselves and in the healthcare aspect especially, which is what here we'll kind of talk about, and increase visibility and how you do that and how they do that, as such influences in our communities.
Yes, all of that. Thank you. Thank you, Rama. So we want to kick off today by giving out some credentials on our people who we love. So I'll start with Kendrick. Kendrick holds 14 Grammys. He's also a Pulitzer Prize winner for his 2018 album, Damn. He also holds multiple awards from the MTV Music Video Awards, the NAACP Image Awards, and the Billboard Music Awards.
Yes. Beyonce holds 28 Grammys, winning her first at the age of 19 with her girl group, Destiny's Child. Then she transitioned into being a solo artist. And Beyonce is actually the most decorated musician when it comes to Grammy Awards. I think it's turned to 29 last year, I believe. And she also holds at least 29 MTV Music Awards, making her the most awarded artist in the show's history as well. And that goes for the Grammys as well. She's also performed at 2 Super Bowls. And she recently did Beachella, which was Coachella, as you know, is a festival that's largely in California, largely attended by you won't typically see African American folks represented in the space. The music is mainly tailored to punk rock, which of course we started, but now mainstream media, we don't get accredited for that. So Beyonce took upon herself to share Black history, Black culture, specifically African American culture, HBCUs, historically Black universities, and to really shed light on how what history looks like, what music looks like, where it stems from. And Black history, just putting Black history on a platform that we all needed to see in that space in Coachella. So, and she also did Black is King, which was directly, this was a soundtrack for The Lion King, but more specifically to amplify the voices of West African music, West African artists that we see, bring them to the mainstream platforms so folks can really, again, the amplifying, using her space, using her art to really uplift us and show our voices. And she received the BET Humanitarian Awards, the Billboard Music Award, and NAACP Image Awards. I mean, just name it all. I love icon.
Literally iconic, legendary status. So a little bit more about Kendrick Lamar and some of his LGBTQ influence in his life. So there's a song titled Auntie Diaries on Kendrick Lamar's newest album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. The song has received a lot of backlash from various communities. A lot of folks who usually vibe with Kendrick were feeling the contents of this album. They didn't quite feel seen within it. And, maybe folks just, weren't into him sharing his inner work on himself and his reflections in his life. It just wasn't something that they wanted to hear in an album, so they didn't really connect with it. Also heard a lot of feedback and backlash from the LGBTQ communities for his use of the F word and misgendering his now uncle on the album. I think at the end of the day, Kendrick has produced his own art, and art is always left up to the consumer to reflect upon and decide kind of what their feelings are about it. So here are some of my feelings. I think it's really incredible that Kendrick used some of the track time of Auntie Diaries to highlight that his uncle is the first person who we ever saw write a rap. It speaks volumes to how exposure to something as an adolescent can literally shape your life trajectory. There are so many folks who might identify as anti-LGBTQ in this world who are also diehard fans of Kendrick Lamar, and I think it's a beautiful thing that someone that they hold in such high regard is who they are and has accomplished what they've accomplished, partially from being introduced to writing songs from his transgender uncle as a youth. It's almost like a life lesson that even when you're trying to be anti-LGBTQ, you literally can't be fully committed to that hateful lifestyle of yours. But you can definitely keep trying, although I personally wouldn't encourage you to, but it's just an interesting kind of thing and phenomenon that will continue to happen because Black creatives kind of influence everything, and especially Black queer creatives influence everything.
Yes, 100% agree. I do agree with you that a lot of the conversation can be around, you can see the negative in it. You can see, but as you mentioned, like art is left to the consumer's interpretation. So it's important how you take it to dissect it, because it's almost not allowing folks to change, not increasing understanding and visibility, normalizing LGBTQIA experiences and what the importance of sharing the stories. Like this is an everyday life, and this is how Kendrick learned. This is how Kendrick was taught about the community. This is their first access to it, and that is just his interpretation and like where and his his intent, I believe, was really to shed light and to normalize it, you know, to affirm um, gender affirming services, essentially. So it's really, really important. Um,
Yeah.
when it comes to Beyonce, in 2019, she dedicated her GLAD award, her GLAD Vanguard award, to her, as she said, in quotes, fabulous gay uncle who died from complications of HIV. So from that this is someone who raised her when she was a young child, and someone who's been in her life, someone who's catered, supported, who and guided her in the space of really living in her truth and being honest. As you can see, her music has taken a very interesting trajectory, a trajectory from where folks will say, "Oh, just pop," to appease or to appeal to the general population or the majority, as you would say, and not really. But through her journey of what the art that she really wanted to put out there was one that was reflective of her community that affects her directly, like talking about BLM, LGBT folks in those spaces and those owning that. So her uncle really allowed her to be that way, to also be brave and apologize during a time that this country is not as accepting, you know, and which directly correlates with her uncle's LGBTQ gay identity, you know, and being HIV positive and what that looked like in the spaces. Then some will say, as you know, as we were living proof of it, it's the world is still not accepting of folks being who they are, especially in the more marginalized spaces and more marginalized identities, like being gay, living with HIV. She believed that his struggle has paved the way for others to live more freely, including herself in her music. She fights for LGBTQ rights as she believes that they are human rights, as we all believe that they are human rights. We all deserve to choose who we love without being shunned or ostracized from spaces. We all deserve the same high level care and inclusion in the spaces that we occupy. Excuse me.
Rama's popular and busy, I'll just so you know.
So yeah, so her uncle really helped them, you know, for them to use their music and their art in a way to storytell and normalize Black and queer freedom in the world, and to remove the stigma that's attached to the LGBTQIA identities, including HIV diagnosis or living with HIV or experiences. And within that, like within LGBTQ hip hop, LGBTQ plus culture and hip hop culture, it's not. They've paved the way to normalize that also, like having queer artists, queer rappers, which is Jay-Z's mom. Jay-Z used his album, which is Beyonce's husband. We talk about him. Used it to share his story and understanding of his mother's journey of coming out as a gay woman and a community member, Gloria Carter. So that alone shed light, and really for folks who look up to Jay-Z and the hip hop community, that it's normal to normalize, not shun it. It really destigmatized LGBT hip hop in LGBTQIA communities.
Yeah. Mm. I really love that, both Beyonce and Kendrick have taken time to just highlight, the ways in which they were taken care of as kids by their uncle and their aunt, and who is now their uncle. I think it also kind of sheds light on that horrible argument that we often hear from folks who are anti-LGBTQ, complaining about exposure to LGBTQ communities to young kids and how it'll turn them gay or turn them trans or turn them whatever. But realistically, I've had the pleasure to do a lot of interviews with people who are part of the LGBTQ community, and everyone usually says, like, before age 10, even as young as age 5, like, I knew who I was, but there wasn't space for me to be who I was. And so I needed to find my community in order to really come out and be me. But it was never a thing of like, oh, I was being read to by a drag queen in my school, and now I've turned gay, or I've become a gay person, or I'm part of the community now. It just, those things don't work like that. And so I love that both Kendrick and Beyonce give us a little peek into their lives as young people, being taken care of by these queer people in their life. And our living proof that, like, spending time with someone who is your elder and who is queer is not going to make you automatically queer. So let's squash that argument here today.
Immediate,
Right? And that
immediately.
horrible logic thinking, like, it's It's just not how it works. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's definitely not how it works, especially in community, in more specifically in Black spaces, and the stigma that we have and the way we shun folks for the LGBTQ identities. And like you mentioned, they definitely use their art to break that stigma down. And with Jay-Z's mom, with her uncle, and being that there are two heterosexual folks who have great LGBTQ experiences as far as like caregivers and folks who occupy their spaces. And but even then, it doesn't. Folks are to say that to negate that you're born the way you are, but just you're not in an affirming space. You're not in a safe space. So advocacy has to continue. Their work pushes the advocacy to continue to give folks space to be exactly who they are, because that's when other rates of depression, rates of suicide, rates of everything increases, because there's a lack of affirming care and affirming spaces for folks to be who they are. And it's so important that your own advocacy matters. Challenge your own stigmas, challenge your own biases on a daily basis, and the folks around you. The conversation is important to be had. When you listen to music, when you listen to lyrics, try to ingest things that would challenge your linear thoughts, so
yeah, because if your thoughts aren't being challenged, are you growing as a person?
exactly.
So I know there's been a lot of backlash about how Kendrick refers to his uncle in the song Auntie Diaries, that he's continuing to misgender them. I think for me, when I listen to that track Auntie Diaries, I hear the narrative of how a child's mind processed gender transition, and how this child learned and continued to love and accept their family member despite them transitioning. It's also a beautiful peek into how a child's mind works through and processes accepting what other people choose not to accept. I think we hear a lot of debate and discussion about how people feel about transgender children accessing gender affirming healthcare like hormones, and folks who oppose this type of healthcare because it is healthcare. It is actually. People who oppose this kind of healthcare, often that is life-saving healthcare, argue that young people are too young to make this kind of bodily decision for themselves. But research tells us that people often don't regret their gender affirming care. It's often a thing that is better to start off as a young person. So if you are stopping yourself from going through puberty in the way that your body would want to, it's just a healthier process for you as a person versus having to kind of reverse that when you're older. And gender affirming care literally saves lives. So just highlighting all of that information. But I bring all this up to say that we don't really talk about kids who don't identify as LGBTQ and how they respond to the LGBTQ people in their lives. And I think that this song, Auntie Diaries, in particular, gives us some understanding on how a young Kendrick continued to love his uncle and didn't become LGBTQ as a result from it. This occurrence alone should break some of the stigma that people hold on to, again, in thinking that exposure to LGBTQ communities will make someone LGBTQ, especially when, if anything, that person or child was already LGBTQ and just needed to be exposed to their community and gain a better understanding of themselves, and just be encouraged to be their authentic self.
Exactly. Like I mentioned, just growing up in spaces that you don't see yourself, it's hard. It's not that you're replicating behavior or acting on a behavior. It's just you've been shunned to be who you are, and then that manifests in different things, and you project different things happen. So just be, as folks who are raising children or who are in community, have to be mindful of what safe spaces resemble, and what being intentional, and what being allyship means to folks. And that does not mean the heterosexual norm. That is not the world that, and also there's grace on both ends, right? So we can say, oh, and Kendrick Lamar, folks who are challenging his story, there are so many stories that relate to that's how they learned, that's how they knew, and no one took the time to ask them questions. And if you hear and people queer folks are so open to asking questions. Similar as a Black woman, if there are the intersections of my identities, there are questions questions that other folks would want to ask. So being gracious and making space for folks to learn and being intentional about it. But it's so important to never assume. It's important to always ensure that you're asking the proper questions, and be mindful of the questions, even putting setting the expectations, or like starting the conversation with this, I don't know if I'm asking this correctly. That simple as that means that you thought about the question before. But I do know that we are experts of our own journeys and our own experiences. So you have to give people that space to do so.
Exactly. I think my therapist would call this practicing genuine inquiry. Like you're just practicing curiosity that's based on you wanting to learn more and nothing else. Not like no ulterior motives, no hateful motives, like none of that. Just wanting to educate yourself and learn a little bit more from someone. But of course, there is work that you can do on your own time, with the help of Google. It's not, LGBTQ people's job to educate you, but you can be in a space where you, have felt comfortable enough to ask genuine questions that you have that are not harming anyone, but honestly just kind of helping you better understand and navigate spaces that you kind of continue to show up as a respectful and dignifying individual in LGBTQ safe spaces. I think a major section or sector of community within the Black community is the Black church. And it's a place where so many of us spend time in and continue to spend time in. But if you identify as LGBTQ, and depending on the congregation, church can easily be an unsafe space and community for you. And part of the narrative that Kendrick shares in his song Auntie Diaries is about his cousin who ends up transitioning as well, and kind of the chapters and fallouts and rebuilding of their relationship that came with it. There's a part of the song that he highlights an experience he and his cousin had in church where his pastor calls out his cousin and says his cousin is just going through some things in relation to his cousin transitioning, and also shares in that space that their aunt had transitioned, or sorry, their uncle, their aunt had transitioned to a man and is now their uncle, and kind of blamed them for the abomination that the world is in relation to both of their transitions. It's pretty wild that someone can feel like they've got that much power to say that in the middle of a church service to a whole room of people and like feel comfortable doing that.
That's a level. That's a level of privilege we should all be afraid of.
Yeah.
Not think before you speak. Like,
yeah, I don't think that pastor was thinking that day. In my opinion, I don't think that pastor was thinking that day.
in mind, but on their end, they could be. This is the religious teaching, but religion is also left up to interpretation. We all interpret everything that we read to on a personal line.
Exactly. So like the lyric that ends up following this call out of from the pastor is, or sorry, the lyric that ends up following this call out from the pastor, Kendrick says, "I said, Mr. Preacher Man, should we love thy neighbor? The laws of the land or the heart? What's greater?" And so Kendrick describes himself as physically getting up and saying this during their Easter Sunday church service, and the appreciation that his cousin had for this action, because love is action. And so he also ends up saying in the song, like, the day that I chose humanity over religion, the family got closer and it was all forgiven. And I think that that's such an important nugget to take away. Like, you can be in any space listening to anything, right, and consuming it, but it's up to you to take away the parts that make sense in terms of the life that you want to move forward with and the life that you want to lead, and also up to you to reject the parts that are like, oh, this doesn't make any sense, and this person is sharing with a lot of people who might mindlessly be here just absorbing everything like a sponge. So we all have this duty and responsibility to ourselves to make sure that we aren't always just consuming everything like a sponge, but making it selective and making sure that it aligns with our values and our core beings. And I'm so appreciative of Kendrick as an artist and visionary and the legend that he is for using his platform to spark conversations about transgender acceptance and LGBTQ acceptance within Black communities and all audiences who engage with his work. And then there's one final quote that I want to highlight from the song, and it's the opening line, and it goes, "The heart plays in ways the mind can't figure out." And that's okay.
And that's okay. And that is okay. And that is okay. Yeah, everything you said, spot on and same. Because they continue to use their art to really speak truth and to encourage acceptance and learning. We all have so much to learn about all the communities that we surround ourselves with that are around us. And it is at your individual level, your advocacy is yours. It is a responsibility that we have to a community, especially in Black and brown spaces. we rely heavily on community. Community is healing. Community is visibility. Community is growth. Community is everything leads us. So we would word of mouth in spaces hold more reign than anything. That's how we operate. So we are credible sources to one another. So it's important to remember that. And it's important to really, it's not even about being tolerant, it's about being intentional in the spaces that you occupy, you know, and the folks around you, because we have a responsibility to one another, especially when it comes to destigmatizing LGBTQ identities and experiences in our communities. We're doing ourselves a disservice by continuing to push that narrative.
Exactly. Please, you don't have to tolerate any kind of hate. You can stand up, you can say something, you can ask the questions that are like, why are you preaching this hate? But again, it's all our responsibilities to stand up or to speak out or to just make sure that you're in that space and you're not soaking up every piece of information that doesn't make sense. Like
Right.
have your thinking cap on at all times.
Always challenge it.
But yeah. Well, thank you all. Any final words as the founding member of the Beehive, Rama, before we close out and talk about COVID-19 vaccines?
Listen to break my soul, and on that she has a big Rita on there to further amplify and show the history of the music of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. Like, so it's important. Listen to Break My Soul.
Yes, please. And if you haven't, I would say check out Auntie Diaries. It's a really beautiful song, in my opinion. Again, just shining light on how a child's mind processes LGBTQ acceptance and the ways in which adult minds are also able to process LGBTQ acceptance. But yeah, so before we go, we want to give you a few reminders about COVID-19 and vaccines. If you've already gotten vaccinated, congratulations. You've taken a really important step in preventing yourself, your loved ones, and your communities from getting sick. Multiple variants have sort of crossed the world, and it's totally understandable why you might want to keep wearing your mask. The vaccine isn't 100% effective at preventing new cases of COVID-19, but it is very effective at making sure that you don't get very sick with COVID, that you don't end up in the hospital with COVID, and that you don't end up dying from COVID. So please, if you are vaccinated, we thank you so much. If you haven't been vaccinated and you're looking for an appointment, Whitman-Walker Health has COVID-19 vaccine available, and everyone, we've got the vaccine available, and everyone can call us at 202-207-2480 to schedule an appointment. If you're having trouble making an appointment with us, or we're just not accessible to you location-wise, and you're a DC resident, you can find information on COVID-19 vaccine walk-up locations and eligibility at vaccine.dc.gov, or by calling 1-855-363-0333. For Maryland residents, you can learn more about the Maryland vaccine distribution process and schedule a vaccine appointment at covidlink.maryland.gov or calling 1-855-634-6829. Again, that's 1-855-634-6829. And if you're a Virginia resident, learn more about the Virginia vaccine distribution process and schedule a vaccine appointment at vaccinate.virginia.gov or by calling 1-877-829-4682. If you have not been vaccinated and you're not looking for an appointment, please continue to follow CDC guidelines for mask wearing, quarantining, social distancing, and the like. It's very important that you consider getting the vaccine and discuss COVID precautionary measures with those around you, but be mindful of masks and keep your distance, but especially when you do not know whether the people around you are vaccinated or not. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please follow our Whitman-Walker family at Whitman-Walker on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and keep up with our services and latest updates at whitman-walker.org. You can also follow some of our family pages and accounts at Real Talk DC _ and at No Filter DC. We wish you an amazing day of listening to Break My Soul and Auntie Diaries.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rama.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.